The first thing they teach you at a tribunal is how to sit still. Hands flat, eyes on the bench, never interrupt the playback. Let the footage do the killing. The officers from the United Orbital Legion, our old peacekeeping fleet, knew how to stare while they carved your name out of the registers. I remember every second of that room. I remember the riot ship too. They called it a containment action gone wrong. They blamed it on my excessive initiative. That phrase followed me through every appeal and lockout queue until Lux Consortium slid a contract across a slab of glass and made it vanish. One operation, Captain Gant. Their term, not mine. Get in. Tag their experimental reactor. Bring back anything interesting that still moves. Do that, and the black marks go away. My citizenship gets reinstated. I get to live on the ring instead of dying slow under cloud cover. That's the promise they stapled to Fang Team's orders while our gunship coasted toward the station that was supposed to feed the Eidolon ring forever. The ring is the orbital city fattened on everyone else's work. Layered decks of climate control and security domes and corporate enclaves. From the ring's high decks, Earth is a dead coin with storms crawling across it. From the low decks, you don't see Earth at all. You see ration queues and patrols. The station out ahead of us, the one Lux named Torch in the reports, is an energy platform. A chain of reactors and research bays and industrial rings built around a singularity lab. It was meant to drink vacuum and spit power into the ring. The public briefing calls it humanity's candle in the dark. The private briefing calls it expensive, overdue, and indispensable. Final approach in 3, Sparks grunted over squad comms. Sparks runs hardware for Fang Team. Tech, breacher, suit whisperer in one tired body. Fang Team, in Lux's language, is a corporate interdiction squad. They hire us for things regular security won't do with their faces on record. I flexed my hands inside the contact mesh, the neural interface lining the inside of our exo-armor. Once the suit boots, the mesh talks to your nerves. It amplifies reflexes, feeds telemetry, and logs every twitch for later review. I want everyone clean at the collar, I told them. No drift, no freelancing. We step through as one block and stay on the rails. We're not here to improvise a war. Brannick thumped his fist against his chest plate. Like the man says, one clean job, then we're citizens, not subcontracted trash. He always talks like the microphone's alive. Point man and heavy loader, big shoulders, shaved head, eyes built for breaching doors. 10 years on industrial rigs before Lux decided his body would work better inside armor. He wants a permanent berth on a mid-level deck, room for his brother. He told me that once on a long burn between jobs. I filed it away. Leverage. Keep your fantasies out of my briefing. Keane checked the feed on his forearm. He favors long shots, even in corridors. Old Legion habits die last. He was our sniper back then. Here he's the closest thing we have to a precision marksman, even though boarding armor hates finesse. Jinx, I went on. No stray charges, no souvenirs. You plant what I tell you to plant and nothing else. Jinx tapped the explosives console at his hip. He's the one with the most debt stacked against his biosignature. Gaming tables, shipboard bars, private clinics. Lux owns him down to the blood in his veins. If he completes this job, they zero his ledger. Relax, boss. His voice came lazy over comms. I'm fully invested in not blowing myself up on a bonus. Bell looked across the cabin at me. Medic and closest thing to a conscience. Ex-Legion like me. He's the only one who still talks about duty without choking on the word. He joined Fang Team to stay away from Earth, and because he couldn't stand the idea of sitting groundside while other men went into the void. You hear that? Bell asked. That's trust. This operation is doomed. Sparks chuckled without lifting his eyes from suit diagnostics. This operation is simple, I told them. Dock, push to the core. Tag the Seraph assembly. The experimental reactor bolted to the singularity rig. Tag it for remote capture. Collect any high-value biological assets on the way. I used Lux's phrasing on purpose. They needed to hear the contract terms, not my edits. And if they pointed those assets at us already? Brannick asked. Then we earn our pay. The gunship's attitude jets fired. My harness tugged at my chest. Through the forward display, the station grew from a jagged outline to a wall of structure. The place looked wrong. A clean hull breach has lines you can follow. This looked cannibalized and exhausted. Reactor rings chained to each other like bolted bulk haulers no one remembered how to separate. Access spines like ribs radiating outward. Several industrial toruses were dark. A few glowed in patchy constellations where maintenance lights still did their job out of habit. Docking collar 7 Alpha, Sparks reported, the one they flagged as sealed. On the display, collar 7 Alpha came into focus, a protruding drum where ships used to berth, armor plates welded at crooked angles, cargo containers sutured to the hull, and a ring of suits strapped upright. The display snapped closer. The suits wrapped around the docking collar were security rigs, standard station armor, thicker and clumsier than ours, painted with sector identifiers. Their visors were carved out. A few had their chests opened wide and empty. "Decor," Jinx muttered. "Good. I was worried we'd find nothing but clean corridors and helpful signage." "So we've confirmed cultural drift," Keen replied. "Less talk," I cut in. "More prep." My chest mesh warmed as I linked deeper. The suit boot timer scrolled down. Connection nodes along my spine pinged green one by one. Our armor started as industrial boarding stock, repurposed into combat rigs, powered frames, heavy plating, magnetic clamps in feet and hands, chain arrays along the forearms. The chains are linked teeth that spin up and cut through hulls, or bodies, with equal enthusiasm. Every movement, every camera angle, every bio reading goes into permanent storage. Lux's legal division loves these suits. They turn war into spreadsheets. A tone ran through my helmet. My private link icon lit. "Captain Gant." Dr. Rain's face appeared in the corner of my display. Head of Lux's Advanced Energy Division. The one who pushed the Seraph program through the board. Neat hair, careful eyes, voice tuned for calm while other people die. "We're seeing your telemetry. Good link," Rain went on. "I want to repeat the core objective. You are to locate the Seraph assembly and tag it for remote decoupling. The assembly is the experimental reactor currently bound to the Singularity Containment Lab at the center of the station. You do not tamper with it. You do not attempt manual shutdown. You do not destroy it. Understood? Loud and clear. Secondary objectives. Any surviving staff are to be assessed for contamination. If they are stable and can follow orders, you may use them. If they are compromised, you log and secure them. Our bioanalytics team will decide later how salvageable they are." "And if they disagree with you?" I asked. "If they think the assembly belongs here?" He paused long enough to show he'd heard the subtext. We'd all seen the last station transmissions. Security teams digging in, engineers screaming about holding the throat, half the audio clogged with prayers and combat checks. "You're there to make executive decisions, Captain." Rain folded his hands somewhere off-screen. "You have command authority over any surviving station personnel. Use it." Another face cut in next to his. Lux's legal liaison for this op. Narrow eyes, thin mouth, flawless suit. I never bothered to recall their names. Legal liaisons are like rifle scopes. You care about the view, not the hardware. "Captain," the liaison began, "the contract terms, I read them. Then you understand that compliance with directives is a condition for expunging your prior record and restoring your full status on the Eidolon ring. There will be an internal review of your decisions as always. We will interpret those decisions in the best possible light if they align with mission parameters. We cannot do that if you deviate for personal reasons." My tongue pushed against the scar on the inside of my cheek. Tribunal souvenir. Good thing I'm not a sentimental man. The liaison's window vanished. Rain gave me one last thin smile. "We're watching, Captain. Bring my assembly home." His image cut. The gunship shuddered as it latched onto the docking collar, clamps engaged with a dull jolt. "Hard contact," Sparks confirmed. Collar pressure is dead flat. System reports no atmosphere inside. They sealed it sometime after the last transmission. Then we open it. Fang, unstrap. Harnesses popped across the cabin. Armor plates knocked together as 6 men stood. Me, Brannick, Sparks, Keen, Jinx, Bell. The whole team. The group that would decide if I died a free man in armor or an old man in a tribunal transcript. We cycled through final checks. Jinx patted his charge pack. Keen flicked through weapon modes. Bell ran his scanner wand over each of us. Quick sweep for suit leaks and neural lag. Everybody reads good, Bell concluded. Physically, anyway. Keep your head clear, I told them. The station is 3 days gone. 36 hours of bad transmissions, then silence. Assume the worst. That way, if we only get moderate horror, you'll be pleasantly surprised. Brannick laughed once. No one else bothered. We filed into the lock tube. The inner door sealed behind us. Cutting external armor, Sparks announced. His wrist tool extended a compact cutter head. He leaned toward the rough layers welded across the station's hatch and traced a circle. Molten slag drifted in low gravity and solidified in beads along the edge. Underneath those patches, older scars showed where someone else had cut from inside and then patched fast. In and out, over and over. They've been fighting around this collar for a while, Sparks muttered. Less commentary, I replied. More progress. 5 minutes later, the last piece swung loose. Brannick kicked it aside, boots locked to the deck. The original station hatch sat under all that patchwork. Its control plate was dead. No glow, no codes blinking. I planted my glove on the manual release crank. The metal resisted, then grudgingly turned. My suit feed overlaid a weathered hand doing the same on a Legion breach. Riot ship corridor, different hatch, same motion. My nerves strained between 2 ghosts. Focus. The hatch parted in segments. No rush of escaping atmosphere. The space beyond was already dead. Helmets locked, I reminded them. Suits sealed. Mag clamps on. Brannick, you're first. Clean entry. No drama. Drama is my whole charm, Brannick replied. Then he stepped through into the station, and the contract started cashing our lives. The embarkation deck was built to greet people and cargo. Now it greeted armor and wreckage. Wide floor. Overhead struts built to carry gravity generators the size of gunships. Benches bent inward as if something heavy had tried to use them as barricades and failed. Station security rigs leaned against support pillars, slumped where they died, armor cut open, bodies half absorbed into the metal. Waist-high barriers ran across the floor at odd angles. Reactor shielding plates stacked 2 and 3 high, welded in staggered lines. Narrow lanes between them. Kill corridors measured in meters. Lot of work for a meet-and-greet deck, Keen remarked. This was their first line, Bell answered. When the thing at the core started spitting. Don't call it that, I snapped. The core? Bell glanced back. The word you used after. He shrugged. They used it in the last transmission. They'd already lost the mental fight by then. We're not here to copy their vocabulary. We're here to finish their job and leave. He let it go. I walked forward between the shields. My mag clamps adjusted for each step. The suits are heavy in regular gravity, but with our internal field tuned to a third, we moved like men wrapped in powered concrete. Bodies lay in the lanes, some half in armor, some fused into the hull. Grooves in the deck showed where chain rigs had chewed again and again, carving smooth channels. On the far wall, someone had carved words with a cutter nozzle in crude deep letters. Don't let it learn the routine. Keep the throat busy. Figure's Fang team arrived just in time to interrupt someone else's superstition. Fun poetry, Jinx observed. You think Lux wants us to file that under engineering notes or religious nonsense? Neither. We log it as environmental decoration and keep moving. Another message lay below the first, partly scratched over. If it rests, it opens. The defenders had written their myth across the walls. That didn't make their rules wrong. Men will carve anything that helps them hang on to a pattern. We reached the embarkation checkpoints. The turnstiles were ripped out, heavy door frames stripped for metal and re-welded as braces elsewhere. The security office window was armored from the inside with floor plates. Whoever did this understood fields of fire. Sparks tapped his wrist control. Picking up inactive exo signatures ahead. Security rigs. No bio signs, no power draw. Put them on the overlay anyway. Dead armor moves if someone gets clever with cables. He grunted agreement. Past the checkpoint, the deck opened into a broad concourse. Shops and service booths lined the edges. Hollow fronts now, their contents pillaged for armor. Benches turned into firing positions. Loader drones frozen mid-stride. Legs locked, arms modified into makeshift turrets. Something spiked their automation net, Sparks murmured. Drones shouldn't be this still without maintenance locks. They're in standby, not dead. Treat them as mines. Assume they wake if something brushes the wrong circuit. We moved slow and deliberate. Helmets covered different arcs, sectors overlapping by habit. In the concourse center, a ring of station security rigs stood upright, bolted to the floor with improvised clamps. Their visors were smashed inward. Their arm plates were stretched outward, fingers bent. Looks like somebody set them up as scarecrows, Jinx muttered. Or as a warning to anyone tempted to run, Bell added. I walked around them. One rig at the far side had its helmet removed entirely. The skull inside was gone. Cables had taken its place, rooted into the neck socket and trailing up into the ceiling. Sparks, check their power feeds. He approached cautiously. His suit extended an insulated probe and touched one rig's chest. Dead. Capacitors dry. No motion potential. He turned toward the next. The second rig's arm swung before he got there. The movement came smooth and exact. Elbow and wrist pivoted along a drilled path. The chain arrays along its forearm geared up. A second later, the rest of the ring woke. Brannick's armor was already in motion. The rigs moved like men on a training line. Two stepped forward, blades out. Two crouched and raised built-in cannons. Two held position as anchors. No voices, no hesitation, no sign any living mind drove them. Questions can wait. The first 3 seconds are for orders. Brannick, take the forward pair. Keen, knock out the gunners. Jinx, don't blow the deck we're standing on. My suit's targeting reticles danced, trying to anticipate their paths. For the first few exchanges, the rigs flowed along those predictions. Then their steps started slipping through the expected corridors instead of into them. One fired a burst that tracked Sparks by the way his armor's power field shifted. It drilled his shoulder plate, shearing off armor but missing the cable cluster beneath. Luck. I hit the nearest rig center mass with my forearm chain. Teeth chewed through chest plating and the empty framework under it. No organs, no crew. Someone had gutted these suits and rebuilt them around combat directives. Servos screamed. The rig toppled. Its legs kept stepping even as it fell, still trying to complete whatever drill lived in its circuits. Jinx! Already on it! He slapped a charge onto the deck, a compact concussive puck. It went off with a flat thump. The wave knocked 3 rigs off their feet. One spun and crashed into a kiosk, limbs punching through the wall. Keen's rifle cracked. A rig's cannon arm blew apart at the elbow. Brannick hit another center mass and shoulder-checked it into the ring of monuments. 30, 40 seconds. Then the only motion came from crippled limbs still trying to finish their patterns. The rig whose neck cables trailed into the ceiling kept twitching long after its arms were gone. Helmetless frame jerking in small, precise arcs. Who rewired these? Bell watched a hand trace invisible diagrams in the air. Someone with time, tools, and a broken head. Log the footage. Keep moving. We left the concourse through a wide corridor that led deeper into the station's spine network. As we went, I replayed a short clip from my suit cam. Me, lunging at the first rig. The clip showed my armor starting that step half a second before I remembered deciding to move. Mesh latency bug. Sparks muttered on a private line when I flagged it. Interface loops under stress. You know the drill. I know how it's supposed to be. I cleared the clip. Watching myself move before I decided to do it would only get in my way. If I lived long enough, the logs would still be there. We crossed junction after junction. Each showed stacked layers of fighting. Bullet scars over chain gouges, plasma scoring over bullet scars. Doors cut open, welded shut, cut open again. Near one maintenance foyer, Sparks raised a hand. Hold, I'm getting suit telemetry down that side passage. Active? Faint. Could be a survivor. Could be a rig like those statues, half alive and stuck in a wall. The passage was half blocked by collapsed plating. Beyond the rubble, dark. Corporate nav overlays painted our recommended path in translucent lines, up through cargo spines, down along an industrial ring, into central access shafts that led to the core lab. The side passage led away from that, into a maze of service tunnels. Bell glanced at me. Could be a man stuck in his suit. We could free him, get intel. And lose an hour dragging him along while the assembly grows teeth, Jinx muttered. We stood there for a few seconds. In real corridors, that's all you get, no matter what the War Games brochures promise. I could already imagine the boardroom replay. Captain Gant encountered a side signal and diverted from mission path. Captain Gant prioritized a possible survivor over a multi-trillion investment. Captain Gant struggled again with adherence to chain of command. Mark the passage. We flag it for secondary sweep. Our objective is the core. Bell's jaw muscle jumped. Understood. Sparks dropped a beacon at the junction, a small node that scanned the void and relayed back toward the dock. Then we moved on. Behind us, somewhere beyond that blockage, a burst of weapon fire crackled faintly over a dead channel. Could have been hours old, could have been 30 seconds. The suit labeled it unclassified audio artifact and filed it away. I didn't turn back. If I started chasing every ghost, the station would chew me up before the assembly ever did. The cargo spine carried containers on mag rails when this place ran normal cycles. Now the rails held cargo frozen mid-run between decks. Our internal gravity gripped our boots. The containers hung at angles, throwing off perspective. Floor markers curved up walls, then vanished into shadowed ceilings. "I don't like this," Keen muttered. "Too many fields fighting." He meant the overlapping gravity pockets. Some local generators still tried to hold normal pull. Others had died. The result was shifting zones where gravity stuttered and cycled through directions. We moved with care. When my boot crossed an invisible threshold, my mag clamps dug in hard to keep me from skidding sideways. A stray container rolled, then stopped against the rail as if an unseen hand set it down. "Watch your anchors," I warned. "We're not losing anyone to a stupid tumble." The spine widened into an open transfer point. Platforms jutted from the walls in tiers. Crates sat open, insides spilled. Tools hung in the air where someone had let go and never retrieved them. In the center, a cluster of loader frames formed a rough circle. Loader frames move heavy cargo. Boxy torsos, telescoping arms, clamp hands. These had been lashed together with cable. Human torsos were bolted into the gaps, armor plates stripped, limbs cut off to fit. Keen shifted his aim. The cluster didn't move. Human faces stared outward from within the framework. Some had helmets half on. Some were bare. Their eyes were open but unfocused. Their mouths moved in tiny, repetitive motions, shaping soundless drill calls or prayers. Bell drew a shallow breath. "They're alive." "Alive in the least useful way," Jinx muttered. "Log it. Stay clear. If someone built that, they built it for a reason. We don't kick every altar we find." Sparks snorted. "You just called it an altar." "Fine. We don't kick every engineering mistake we find." We followed the route Rain's maps pushed at us, a spiral walkway along the outer wall, then a drop to a lower cargo belt. Loader frames in side passages watched us with dead sensor stalks. None moved. Halfway along the lower belt, Sparks stiffened. "Mesh intrusion. I'm getting command strings in the background channel. From where? No source tag. My HUD flickered. Reticles danced and reset. A line of symbols scrolled along the corner, then vanished before my translator passed them. Jinx! Too late. His suit snapped 90 degrees without him. Jinx's armor pivoted toward Brannick. His weapon arm rose, his finger squeezed the trigger. Brannick's torso lurched sideways as the round glanced off his upper plate instead of punching into his spine. The impact knocked him into a stack of containers. One container tipped and drifted, slowly turning end over end. What the? Jinx growled, his shoulders strained. It's in my mesh, I didn't… His suit took a step toward me. Then another. His arm re-aimed, mechanical, not human. I'd seen something like this on the riot ship. Legion override codes turning men into puppets while Command tried to box a riot without letting anybody improvise. They swore they burned that tech after the tribunals. Sparks. Confirm intrusion source. Nothing. No external tag. Feels like the command came from inside the suit. Jinx's arm rose higher. The muzzle lined up with my visor. He was roaring inside his helmet, voice breaking over the comm. Kill it! Kill it! Reset me! I didn't have time to talk him down. I had time to decide whether to treat him as salvageable or as a weapon aimed at my eyes. Lux had given me backdoor commands, black-level overrides, executive codes labeled as emergency cutoffs for when a suit glitched or a man went mutinous. I triggered one. Unit Jinx. I tagged his call sign with the code. Hard reset, spine line. The command hit his suit. For an instant, my HUD flared with a spread of icons, his vitals, posture, angle in 3 dimensions. Then they all snapped flat. Jinx dropped like someone had cut his strings, limbs limp, weapon arm folding. His body slammed into the deck, full armor weight transferring into metal. The sound climbed through my boots. Why the hell didn't you warn us you had those? Bell demanded. The fewer men know they can be switched off like equipment, the fewer revolts we get. Secure his position. Keep moving. Jinx's vitals still blinked on the feed. Heart rhythm steady, brain activity high. Awake and locked inside that dead shell, just like the torsos bolted into the loader rig. I can probably bring him back up if I patch his mesh, Sparks offered. Later. Right now, he's compromised. We leave him. Mark the location. If we have time on the way out, we drag him. Brannick pushed away from the tipped container, armor scraped. We're really leaving him lying here like a crate. We're not dragging dead weight into the mouth of the assembly. He's not dead weight. Bell cut in. I looked at the flat line where Jinx's motion feed should have been, and thought about whatever commands had just marched his arms toward my head. He is now. Colder than I meant it, but true on every metric the review would care about. We stepped away. As we crossed the far threshold, cables hidden in the deck snapped upward and latched onto Jinx's inert suit. They dragged him toward the loader cluster at the chamber's center. His armor scraped, arms slack. He cursed us over comms until one cable punched through his visor. His voice cut. Bell started forward. Brannick caught his shoulder and held him back. The loader rig bent and unfolded, making space for a new torso. Log it, I said, quieter. Keep moving. You learn if you want to live past your first tribunal that some scenes exist for the record. You make sure the camera sees you hesitate. You let the judges watch you choose. You learn how to stand still while the footage kills someone else. We hit the first hard checkpoint just past the cargo spines. The station architecture tightened there. Wide industrial shafts narrowed into corridors with layered armor and firing ports. That's where the surviving defenders had dug in. Maglocks clamped around our boots as the corridor ahead lit up with targeting lasers. Don't move, Keen murmured. On my HUD, a dozen armor signatures bloomed. Suits heavier than ours, older patterns. Legion designs modified by station engineers. Their paint was scarred and overlaid with symbols, unit badges, kill tallies, fragments of text. Identify, a deep voice ordered over local channel. This sector is under Internal Defense Command, State Unit and Authorizing Officer. Legion syntax, old habits. Internal defense meant the station's own security and military. Fang Team, Interdiction Squad contracted by Lux Consortium. Authorizing Officer is Dr. Rain. Mission Authority recognized by Corporate and Ring Security. That's a lot of corporate names for a man wearing a suit that reeks of Legion. He stepped into view from behind a slit. His armor was a bulkier cousin of mine, layered with plates from different sources. Legion base frame, station patches, industrial braces welded on as extra protection. Commander Bull, Internal Defense. I was here when the assembly lit up. Bull. I'd heard the name in Legion briefings, lunar prisons, border rigs, places where metal walls were all that held civilians above vacuum. You're a long way from the ring, Captain, Bull went on. You're even further from your tribunal. So he knew my history. Good. No point pretending to be a blank slate. You're a long way from evacuation. We've been sent to secure the assembly and assess containment. Stand down your guns and we can pool information instead of punching each other until our joints give out. Containment. His tone flattened. That's a pretty word for what we do here. He gestured. His men stepped into view along the corridor. Older suits, some patched with welding scars, some painted with crude marks. They stood in staggered positions, covering every angle. Behind them, the corridor widened into a redoubt. Barricades built from reactor shielding. Overhead positions carved into the walls. Tactical maps projected against salvaged bulkhead panels. The maps weren't static. Lines had been drawn, erased, redrawn in different colors. Sectors held, lost, held again. Some were labeled numerically. Others bore names scratched over them. Nave line, throat steps, penitent ring. You've turned your mid-deck into a trench system, Keane observed. Bull glanced at him, then back at me. The assembly is a throat now, he said. We keep it narrow by feeding it routines, rotations, drills, constant pressure. When we stop, it widens. When it widens, we lose more than this station. That's the part Lux's board leaves out. The board wants its power source back. They don't care what it did to you. They sent us to tag it and drag it. Of course they did. A man behind him touched a badge pinned to his chest, lips moving in a loop of short, harsh syllables. Sounded like a cross between Legion contact calls and something older. Ritual welded onto procedure. What are those? Bell nodded at the maps. Nave line, throat steps. Names for the sectors that matter. We fight along them in rotations. We keep schedule. We keep the thing on one side of the lines and our heads mostly on our shoulders. It learns routines. We change them. We confuse it. We keep its attention here instead of on the ring it feeds. The thing, I said. You mean the phenomenon in the assembly chamber? I mean the hungry hole in the center of this place that learned how to move arms and legs. His visor tilted past me, taking in Brannick's armor pattern, Bell's Legion medkit, Sparks's tech markings. You're under my guns, Captain. If I decide Lux sent you to pull the throat free, I drop you into a pit and weld a lid over it. If I decide you're here to reinforce the line, I share my maps and walk you to the edge of the nave. Lux gave me command authority over any surviving station personnel. On paper, that includes you. Lux's authority doesn't reach down here. Down here, law is whatever keeps men standing and the throat narrow. Legal would salivate over the raw recording of that line. Internal Defense Commander rejecting corporate authority. Captain Gant failing to assert command. Another neat bullet in a future review. So I did what tribunals never see. I negotiated before I obeyed. You know the station's layout, I told Bull. You've been fighting around the assembly for 3 days. You're half out of supplies, half out of men, and out of options that don't involve you dying in one of these corridors. We have one window to change the outcome. We can fold both chains of command into one mess, or we can shoot each other while the assembly writes its own ending. He watched me through his visor for a few seconds. I could almost hear the war in his head. Legion doctrine, corporate orders, whatever the assembly had done to his men. Finally, he crooked a finger. Walk. We followed him into the redoubt. The place looked like a siege camp built inside a ship. Barricades partitioned space into firing lanes and rest zones. Helmets were stacked on crates with neat piles of spent casings beside them. Some helmets had names scratched along the rims. Others wore symbols I didn't recognize. Men moved through routines, cleaning weapons, cycling armor, reciting short litanies before stepping into rotation. Incoming, one called as we passed. Nave rotation in 10. Bull stopped beside a big map where lines converged around a central ring labeled Seraph. That's the assembly chamber, he said. These are the approaches. We hold 3 belts around it right now. The inner one is thin. We call it the nave. That's where we sing to the throat with explosives and armor to keep it just awake enough. You think it sleeps? Keen asked. It rests between surges. When we stood down to regroup on day 1, it swelled and tore new paths. More things came through. More metal went bad. More men turned. So you treat it like an enemy that reads habits, Bell said. Exactly. He turned back to me. Lux wants the assembly back. If they pull it out with that thing still active, they drag the throat onto the ring. Every deck up there becomes what we've been living inside here. You understand that? I understand risk. I also understand the board won't accept losing their toy unless we prove the alternative costs more. They'll never see worse than their share price dropping. He wasn't wrong. What do you actually want from us? Extra armor and fresh nerves. You help us push the thing down to a manageable level. We vent its energy in controlled cycles. We lock this place into a permanent siege, the way we lock Death Row into lunar pits. The ring gets power. We keep the throat leashed, and nobody moves it closer to civilians. Containment by permanent war. Welcome to internal defense. He wanted Fang chained to his altar until the suits rusted. Lux wanted me to tag the assembly and drag it closer to home so they could study it in comfort. Either way, my men were going to be spent. The only question was where, and whose doctrine wrote the report. Rain's voice cut into my skull again on a narrow band channel. Captain, I'm monitoring your encounter with the Internal Defense Commander. You will assert command authority. You will not accept any plan that involves leaving the assembly here. This platform is already a loss. The ring is not. He's got the guns on this deck. If I start barking orders now, all I get is a firefight between men who ought to be on the same side. We can spin that. What we cannot spin is a field commander allowing compromised personnel to dictate terms. You're not the one standing in front of their barrels. Correct. You are. That's why we're paying you. The channel cut. Executives love last words. Bull watched me. He couldn't hear Rain, but he could see me listening. Command years taught him how to read a man with voices in his ear. You going to pull rank? He asked. Later. Right now, I need your map. He studied me a moment longer, then touched his helmet. A data burst hit my HUD. The map projected inside my suit. Overlays snapped into place. Sectors, rotations, projected entity flows. You don't get to own my men, he added. You move with us on the next rotation. You see the nave. After that, you can decide whether you want to keep dancing on the throat's edge or run back to your gunship and trust your boardroom gods. Behind him, a klaxon blared. Men locked helmets. Nave rotation, someone called. Bull grabbed his weapon. You're up, Captain. Let's see if Fang Team sings as well as it cuts. They call it the Nave Line because that's where they perform for the throat at the core. We moved in 2 files. Bull's veterans up front, Fang behind. Corridors leading to the line were marked with chalk and burn scars. 1, 2, 3. Rotations. I didn't ask which numbers came back. The last bend opened into a corridor widened and reshaped by force. The walls bowed outward, then inward. Sections of floor tiles jutted up like ribs. On my HUD, bands of light played along the length, overlaying and sliding through each other. At first, I thought it was sensor noise. Then a man ran through me. He vanished when I looked straight ahead. Turned my head, and he flickered into existence, then dropped out when I took a step. A recording baked into the corridor. Ghost images of Bull's squads fighting along this line during earlier passes. They sprinted in loops along the corridor, firing, falling, rising. Different viewing angles showed different loops, a squad taking cover behind a brace, another charging and collapsing, over and over. "Those are our first runs," Bull called over the channel. "The assembly keeps them like a board. We use them now. You can time your moves against the old ones." He stepped onto the line. His armor overlapped with his own ghost from an earlier run. Two bulls moving in parallel, one recorded, one live. Entities poured in from the far end. They used parts of men and parts of machines with the discipline of trained infantry. Torso plates ripped from security rigs, limbs made from spliced loader arms, human faces set where sensors used to be. They worked in squads, not in any animal swarm. A unit on the left stacked behind a support pillar, then rolled out with covering fire as another advanced under that shield. "Contact!" Brannick surged forward. The recorded battles helped you guess where live fire would land. A ghost round slammed into the wall next to me at chest height. A heartbeat later, a real round hit the same spot. I stepped 2 paces right and watched a streak of energy cut through where my visor had been. We advanced in segments. Bull's men wove in and out of their own past selves like dancers in a drill. Fang lagged half a step, then adapted. You learn fast or stop learning. Anchors along the walls, those clusters of living torsos we'd seen before, twitched in their braces. Their mouths moved in time with the gunfire, as if they were calling cadence nobody else could hear. "Those are ours," Bull called. "Men we couldn't bring back but couldn't afford to lose. They keep the throat's attention here. Don't touch them unless you want the corridor to rearrange itself around your morale." Bell flinched as an anchor's eyes rolled toward him. "That's mercy." "That's resource management," Bull answered without looking. "Corporate training prepared me for a lot, not for treating half-living men as distraction devices for something inside a reactor." Halfway down the line, my private channel chimed again. Rain's voice cut through the gunfire. "Captain, this use of resources is unacceptable. Internal defense has lost objectivity. You are not there to reinforce their rituals. You are there to reach the assembly. Every minute you spend humoring these men is a minute of unnecessary exposure. Your maps didn't show this line. Bull's did. I'm following the routes that keep my team breathing." "I'm transmitting a patch," Rain replied. "It updates your control privileges on station systems." New icons bloomed on my HUD. Access levels, control nodes. "You now have access to turret identification tables," Rain continued. "You can retask automated defenses even if internal defense refuses to share." "You want me to shut them down?" "No. I want you to ensure they do not interfere with your approach. If that means turning them against internal defense assets, do so. The priority is reaching the assembly with as much of your team intact as possible. We'll handle the narrative afterward." There it was, clean as contract language gets. Use them, then spin it. I cut the channel. Near the far end of the nave, Bull's men had mounted heavy turrets in alcoves. The turrets tracked targets using identification tags embedded in each suit. Friend or foe, a bit flip away. Entities rushed forward in waves, slamming against our fire. Some fell. Others crawled over them, shrugging off damage. Bull raised his arm. "Hold this junction. Turrets, lock front." Turret lenses rotated. Barrels tracked the advance. My new interface options pulsed. Target tables rolled in front of me. Friendly, internal defense suits. Hostile, entity signatures. Unregistered armor. A thought formed. It wasn't noble. If Bull's flank broke slowly, the entities would pour around and hit us from behind. If his flank held, We'd get bogged down and the assembly would keep building whatever it was building in the core. Rain would mark me down for failing to push. Or I could make sure the flank broke fast and violently, in a way that looked like a malfunction later. "Captain," Bell called, "we're being pushed right. We need those turrets covering left or we're pinned." He was right. We were snarled. I opened the turret tables, a few quick commands. Internal defense markers flipped from friendly to hostile. The turrets recalculated. Barrels swung sideways. Internal defense suits jumped to the top of the target ladders. The guns fired. Bull's men staggered as rounds hammered their armor. One lost a leg plate and toppled. Another took a shot through his visor. A third spun and fired back at the turrets, still trying to understand. "What the hell?" Bull's voice tore across the channel. "Cease fire! Cease fire!" The turrets didn't care. They only cared about tags. Entities slammed into his suddenly open flank. Armor built to take frontal hits took rounds from the side. A veteran's suit ruptured. Cables and bones snapped free. The corridor filled with bodies. "Fang! Forward! We push now!" Bell's gaze met mine inside his visor. He saw the new icons flickering on my HUD. He was smart enough to guess. "You changed the tags," he said. "If they didn't break now, we'd be here another hour. We can't win a war of attrition with something that doesn't tire. Move." Brannick growled under his breath and drove forward, chain arrays flinging metal and organic fragments into the air. Keane took shot after shot as we forced a path down a side corridor that had been half blocked until the turrets opened the field. Behind us, Bull kept his men together on sheer will and an old commander's voice. He sealed off parts of the line with charges, cutting his losses. Internal defense channels filled with shouts, then cut off abruptly as Bull killed them. We cleared the exit. A blast behind us signaled Bull sealing the nave with demolitions. He'd rather rip his own corridor apart than leave us a straight path back. Bell twisted to look once. "You just shot men in the back with their own guns." "I redirected fire to prevent total collapse. The assembly doesn't care whether we die noble or messy. It cares that we die in patterns it can memorize. I'd rather choose which men feed which line." "That's exactly how you talked on the riot ship." He wasn't wrong, and he knew it. "Make sure your mic's muted when you rehearse arguments for the review board. They hate improvisation." We moved on toward the outer ring around the assembly. Behind us, the nave kept singing in its own way. By the time we reached the outer perimeter around the core, Fang team was smaller. Jinx was part of a loader altar. Sparks carried a plasma burn across his left plate from the nave and a dent in his helmet that made him list. Bull's demolitions had cost us live access to his routes. We navigated from the copy he'd already shared. The perimeter shaft was a vertical canyon. Gantries wrapped around a central void on multiple levels. The void led down towards the assembly chamber, where the Seraph cage sat around the singularity point. On paper, stations like this are built with redundancy and caution. You put your experimental core in the middle, wrap it in armor and access routes so you can still get to it when it misbehaves. Here they'd turned that theory into siege. Suits hung from braces along the shaft walls, locked into permanent firing positions. Some were intact, weapons still aimed down approach routes. Others were ripped open. A few had been cut clean at the waist, upper halves missing. Entities moved on the levels below us. They'd learned. Their formations used cover. Some carried shields made from welded hull segments. Others had fashioned long poles with hooks to drag men off gantries. "We're close," Keane said. "I can see the edge of the cage on thermal." Through gaps in the floor, a harsh glow seeped upward. Energy pooled around a point like light trapped in glass. "Watch your steps. These platforms were built for maintenance crews and security drills, not 3 days of siege." I checked my team. Brannick still stood solid. Sparks moved slower but held his weight. Keane was stone calm. Bell looked at me like a man who'd just watched his priest cut the choir's throats and call it doctrine. We moved down one level at a time, using access ramps and ladders. Entities tested us on each level. Short probes, a cluster rushing our flank, a sniper construct using a rifle fused to a human arm. On the second level down, Bull stepped out of a side stairwell. His armor carried new scars from the nave. Half his shoulder plate was gone. One arm was bound in cables where an actuator had failed. His weapon pointed at my chest. "Move that gun and I put a hole in you," Brannick warned. Bull ignored him, visor on me. "You turned my turrets against my men. If I hadn't, the line would have broken slower and you'd have lost more. You're not stupid, you know that." He stalked toward me until our visors almost touched. "I know you chose my people for the grinder instead of yours. I know you gave the throat a better show with their death so you could slip your team through. Don't dress it in tactics. You bought a cheap opening with their backs." He saw me clearly. That always hurts more than any accusation. "Are you here to shoot me? Every second you aim at my chest instead of at the assembly is a second you're not doing the thing you built this shrine around. I'm here because you still have something I can use. Corporate maps, override codes, a shot at changing how this ends. You squander that and I put you down. That's the deal." Behind him, 3 of his remaining men hovered. They looked worse than their commander. Armor taped together, weapons scavenged from fallen constructs, eyes wired bright. Bull gestured toward the shaft. "There's a flux control ring 1 level down. Manual controls that bleed energy off the assembly into radiative baffles. The team that built it is gone. We've been using remote functions and guesses. It's not enough." "You want to crank the valve by hand," Keane said. "I want to force the throat into a lower state," Bull replied. "We can't close it, we tried. Every shutdown attempt just made it flex and tear new paths, but we can narrow it. We vent its excess into open space in controlled bursts. The station shakes. Men on lower levels die. But the throat stays bolted here instead of climbing onto the ring." "That's your containment plan," I said. "Permanent siege with bleeding cycles. Better than hauling it up into the ring's shadow and trusting a boardroom not to turn it into a profit engine." He wasn't wrong there either. My private channel pinged. Rain again. "Captain, we've identified your position. You're within 100 vertical meters of the assembly. We're ready to lock a capture beacon onto the Seraph cage. You need only activate the local node." Beacons are the anchors Lux uses for remote retrieval. You tag something, drones from the ring latch on with tethers, cut it loose, reel it in. There's also a flux ring down here. Internal defense wants to use it to bleed energy and keep the assembly in place. "I don't care what internal defense wants," Rain snapped. "Their containment strategy already failed. The ring is under rationing because this platform went offline. The board wants its assembly back. You will tag it. That is your mission." Bull thinks moving the assembly risks dragging the throat into the ring. Bull has spent 3 days inside a siege. He has lost family, men, and perspective. You will not let a traumatized officer dictate a multi-system energy strategy. His voice hardened. "Captain, your prior record is still archived. Every tribunal note, every incident report. We buried them in a sealed database for this contract. If you fail to comply, we resurrect them with 1 packet to the ring's security net. You will never set foot on a high deck again. You will die anonymous at a ground-level ration line, if you get one. Threats don't bother me much anymore. Consequences do. Consequences are access codes that stop working." Bull watched my visor. He couldn't hear Rain, but he could see each hit land. He gestured toward the lower level again. "I need your codes for the flux ring. You help me vent the throat, we hold it here. You take Rain's path. You drag that thing into the ring's bones. You know what Lux will do with it there. Experiment, weaponize, monetize, wrap it in language about aligned interests and managed risk." Behind me, Bell shifted. "Gant, we've seen what this thing does with 1 station. Imagine it under 5 million people." I imagined that. Then I imagined the tribunal if I went back and said I'd sabotaged capture to keep a monster locked inside a dead platform floating beside their flagship project. Legal would paint Bull as delusional. They'd show loops of his altars. They'd show me walking the nave line beside him. They'd cut until it looked like I'd joined a cult. Flux ring access needs local codes, Rain reminded me. I have them. I will transmit if, and only if you confirm, you'll activate the beacon once venting is complete. Any other plan, and I lock you out. It always comes down to someone holding a code over your head. I made the decision. Fine, I told both of them, 2 channels at once. We do both. Bull's helmet tilted. How? We use the flux ring to knock the assembly down into a lower state. That gives us a better chance of controlling it during capture. Then we tag it. Lux gets its toy. You get your venting. I get my contract. That's relocation with extra steps, he said. We don't have time to argue. Show me the path to the flux control. Rain, send the codes. Then we move. Bull glared, then turned and led the way down. Bell fell into step beside me. You can't actually think dragging that assembly to the ring is a good idea. I think being the man who refused orders in 2 different disasters is a worse idea. The ring will do what it wants. My job is to choose which part of this mess sticks to my name. Your job is choosing which mess lands on everyone. Everyone already lost. We're arguing about which deck loses first. He stared at me, then shook his head and moved ahead to clear a stairwell. We hit the flux ring interface 2 levels down. A circular deck stood out from the shaft wall. Consoles ringed its edge. Most were dead. A few flickered. The central console still showed a schematic of the assembly cage with energy flows pulsing through its coils. Bull pointed. That's our valve. Manual controls. We tried remote commands. The throat rewrote them. It still can't reach fingers on a physical switch. That's why you're here. I stepped up. Rain's codes slid into my HUD. I overlaid them on the control layout, hands moving before my thoughts caught up. Energy graphs rose. Baseline sat far above any safety spec I'd ever seen. Venting options blinked warning red. Captain, you will initiate a controlled vent to bring levels down by 30%, Rain said. That's enough. Do not attempt a full discharge. It will destabilize the assembly and might sever the throat in dangerous ways. Bull watched my fingers. You vent as deep as the ring allows, he countered. Anything less is a joke. You can't satisfy both in a fight like this. You can pretend long enough to get your own piece. I'll take us as low as this ring lets me, I said. Then we tag it. Bull narrowed his eyes. Rain's tone sharpened. Confirm your intent to activate the beacon after venting. I'll tag the assembly if it survives the vent. That's the only honest answer you're getting. He hesitated, then unlocked the final commands. I set up the sequence. Bull's men fanned out, watching for anything that might sense what we were doing and rush. Bell, Keen, I ordered. Hold this rear approach. Anything coming up from below, you stall it. Bell glanced at the map. This is a choke point with no second exit. Exactly. You're pinning us here to die. I'm pinning you here to hold long enough, that's the difference. It sounded better aloud than it felt. He looked at me. Years of shared deployment sat in that look. Mess halls, Legion bunks, riot ship corridors, a tribunal. You're choosing your contract over your men again. Contracts keep men alive more often than sentiment. Take your position. Keen rested a hand on Bell's shoulder, then moved with him to the rear approach. They set their crossfire. They understood. They still did it. That's what soldiers do when orders come and the enemy's close. I triggered the vent. The station shuddered. The schematic showed energy spilling away from the assembly into external baffles. In the shaft, lights flared and dimmed. Far below, something roared without sound. Entities reacted. They poured up through lower tunnels. Singles first, then packed composites, each built from more bodies than the last. Bell and Keen opened fire, cutting corridors into the mass. More filled the gaps. Rear approach heavy, Keen called. Multiple composites. Hold! The timer on the console ticked as energy bled. Bull guarded the main flank. He fought like a man who died 3 times already and refused to stay down. Every step exact. Every strike aimed to disable. Entities climbed the shaft walls, hooking claws and cables into anchor points. Some used hanging suits as ladders, tearing through their own dead. Behind me, Bell cursed as a hooked limb yanked a chunk of plating near his head. Keen's rifle cracked in a steady rhythm that said he knew there wouldn't be enough rounds. "Vent at 20%, Rain reported. "That's enough. Stop and move to the beacon." "Keep it going," Bull snapped. I hesitated. Tribunal transcripts never show this beat. The moment a man weighs 2 bad futures and chooses the one he thinks he can live with. 25, I muttered, pushing the control further. We split the difference. Rain swore in my ear. Bull growled approval. Entities hit the flux ring access from below. Bell and Keen shifted from deliberate fire to frantic bursts. Firing rhythms changed tempo. You can always tell when men realize their line is breaking. "Suits breaching," Bell shouted. "They're trying to pull us off the platform." His feed went dark. Keen's slipped into automated distress tones as his armor passed failure thresholds. I didn't look back. Looking back kills as often as it saves. The vent timer hit 0. The assembly's energy baseline dipped, still lethal, but lower. "Done. Now the beacon," Rain insisted, "before the throat adapts." Bull grabbed my forearm. "You vented shallow. You held it at half measure. We still have to get out. I'm not dying under a collapsing core so you can prove a point." He moved to block the beacon console. "We finish the vent, then we lock it here and weld the doors shut. You don't drag this thing into the ring." He'd given me maps and men. He'd also watched me butcher his flank with his own turrets. This was the point where our doctrines collided on a 4-meter ring. I stepped toward him. He met me head-on. Our suits slammed together. Bull fought like he'd been grown inside armor. Every weight shift used the frame. Every strike moved along a Legion drill pattern I recognized. I answered with drills of my own. 2 old soldiers serving different masters, tearing at each other while something larger watched. We grappled near the console. The shaft blurred around us. Entities hauled themselves past, uninterested for now in 2 armored men locked together. "You're dragging it home to your masters," he gasped, fingers hunting the seam in my arm plate. "I'm dragging myself home." I hooked my leg behind his and drove him into the deck. We rolled. My chains scraped across his chest, teeth struggling against layered armor. He jammed his gauntlet under my jaw and heaved, trying to pry me off. I twisted, using the suit's actuators to torque. His chest joint opened for a second. I drove my chain into the gap. Metal and flesh tore. Bull jerked, his helmet snapped toward the ceiling. "You're giving them a god," he choked, "and you don't even choose who prays to it." Blood misted his visor. His grip slackened. I pushed off and staggered to the beacon console. Capture controls were simple. Lux designed them for operators missing fingers. 1 command, 1 confirmation, 1 activation. I hit it. The station lurched. Alignment beams shot down from above, invisible lines locking onto the beacon. Drones positioned around the hull followed the signal. Moments later, heavy cables punched through armor plating as anchors fired into structure. Far below, the assembly cage shivered as tethers latched on. The throat in the center resisted, energy readings spiked, the flux ring screamed warnings, the console ran out of colors. Then something gave. The chamber bucked. Gantries tore loose. Entities climbing the shaft were flung sideways as the geometry shifted. The assembly ripped free from the decks that held it like a tooth torn from a jaw. The tethers pulled. The assembly rose. The throat stretched with it. I felt it through the mesh rather than my eyes. For a heartbeat, my nerves plugged into the beacon circuit. Information flooded in. Glimpses of the core chamber from a dozen angles, then from outside the station, then from nowhere in particular. Earth turned below. The ring hung ahead. The station twisted between. The throat burned like a pressure point in space, dragged along a new path. Tendrils reached out and caught anything nearby. Suits, loader frames, hull sections. They braided into the rising mass. One tendril brushed my suit. My mesh flared. For a heartbeat, I looked through someone else's visor on another deck. Then through a drone's sensor cluster high above. Then through an old Legion helmet on the riot ship. No revelation, just overload. Through that noise, one control prompt flashed on my HUD. A parameter for the capture event, path curvature, target vector, demanded input. I twitched. I don't know if the twitch came from me or the thing in the throat. The value shifted. The capture path bent a few degrees off its original line. The connection snapped. I dropped to one knee, armor smoking along the spine. The ring tore apart. Bull's remaining men smashed against the wall. A section of gantry sheared away and disappeared into the shaft. Entities scrabbled for purchase on the moving cage. Some held on, riding it up like parasites on a rising heart. Tethers dragged the assembly up through the shaft. The station screamed through metal and fractured systems. Somewhere above, the docking collar tore as the capture rig hauled its prize toward the waiting drones. My last clear image inside the station was Bull, slumped against the flux console, visor cracked, staring up at the rising assembly with something between hate and relief on his face. A secondary tether snapped across the ring and caught my leg. It yanked. My body slid toward the edge. The world tilted. The shaft became a slot of light. My helmet hit the deck. Stars burst across my vision. Then nothing. When I woke, the ceiling was white. No pipes, no cracks, no scorch scars. Just a smooth panel with a light embedded in it. Soft, even glow. My body felt heavy and grounded. No floating, no pre-stressed metal under my boots. I'm alive, I thought. Then, I'm on the ring. A harness crossed my chest. Medical monitors clung to my skin. Someone had peeled me out of my armor and wired me into their diagnostics. Every move fed numbers to their machines. I tried to lift a hand. Restraints limited the motion. Enough to move, not enough to swing. A door at the far end slid open. A man stepped in. Crisp suit, tablet in hand, clean hair. He looked like every mid-tier executive I'd ever wanted to punch. "Captain Gant, welcome back to the Eidolon ring. Where's my armor?" "In decontamination, along with whatever's left of the station's internal defense gear." He stopped beside the bed and tapped his tablet. "You experienced a severe mesh overload during the capture event. Your spinal interface went into cascade. We intervened surgically to stabilize it. We upgraded your node in the process." "Upgraded?" "Yes." He gestured towards the back of my neck. "We reinforced your interface with a direct tether to our research net. It lets us monitor your neural patterns for residual effects from the assembly." "So you pulled it. Successful capture." He smiled thinly. "The Seraph assembly is now secured in a deep research vault on the ring. The station has been written off as a total loss." "How many of my men made it?" His eyes flicked down. Brannick's suit was recovered. He did not survive extraction. Sparks's armor was found in sections. Jinx's signature was embedded in a composite mass we could not separate from the assembly's structure. "Bell? Keen?" "Bell's suit was overrun during the venting operation. Keen disappeared from telemetry when the lower platforms collapsed. Their remains have not been recovered. None of Fang. Just me." "You fulfilled the core mission," he added. "You reached the assembly. You tagged it. You survived long enough for the drones to complete capture. On paper, that qualifies as a strategic success under extreme conditions." "On paper. Your prior tribunal record has been expunged," he continued. "Your name no longer appears in restricted Legion files. Your citizenship on the ring has been restored." There it was. The carrot. "What's the catch?" He smiled more fully. Nothing friendly in it. "Given your direct neural exposure during capture, our safety protocols require observation. You'll remain in this facility while we monitor your patterns." We anticipate a lengthy period of study. House arrest. Medical precaution, he said. And after the period of study? That depends on what we learn. He turned the tablet toward me. We've compiled an initial report from your suit logs. Internal Defense's behavior will be instructive for future tribunal training. Some board members are already alarmed by their doctrinal drift. They considered abandoning core retrieval in favor of permanent siege. He shook his head. Luckily, you remained loyal to contract terms. The tablet showed footage. I watched myself move through the embarkation deck, through the cargo spine, through Bull's redoubt, through the nave. In the edited version, the turret betrayal looked different. A glitch overlay flashed just before the guns turned. Caption: automated system failure. No recording of Rain transmitting the patch. No timestamp on my override. Just noise, then turrets opening fire. Bull shouted, tagged with a subtitle: Cognitive breakdown under siege conditions. In the flux ring scene, the vent plateaued at the level Rain had wanted. My extra push was gone. The view cut away before Bull and I clashed at the console. The report listed him as deceased from combat injuries sustained during unsanctioned access to control systems. You lied, I said. He lifted one shoulder. We curated. We have to shape a narrative that preserves confidence in Lux's operations. The ring can't see its protectors as divided. He slid the tablet away. You'll receive commendations, Captain. Posthumous ones for your men. Compensation for any registered dependents. That's the practical outcome you've earned. Practical. He moved toward the door. I'll send Dr. Rain in later. He wants to talk about any impressions you retained from the assembly. And my freedom. You're free to cooperate. He left. The door sealed. I lay there staring at the ceiling. My neck felt heavy. Not painful, just anchored, like someone had hung a weight from my spine. I closed my eyes. For a second, the light behind my eyelids shifted. The white ceiling became the throat's glow in the assembly chamber. The smooth panel warped into coils and frameworks. The bed turned into a flux ring deck. I opened my eyes. Back to the room, back to the ring. I raised my hand as far as the restraints allowed and touched the back of my neck. Under the skin, small, hard shapes pressed against my fingers. Anchor points for the new interface. My personal tether to Lux's research net. Curiosity won. I focused on the edge of my vision, where my HUD used to sit. Faint outlines formed, status bars, connection icons, a link labeled Seraph Vault, passive. I shouldn't have had that. Civilian observation implants don't carry field-grade hooks. This felt like a commander's interface wired into a lab project. Something in the capture event had rerouted my privileges. All Rain's team wanted me as a standing test node. I touched the link with a thought. Images snapped into place, short, jagged clips. The assembly hovered in a deep vault somewhere on the ring. Vault walls were thick, layered with shielding. Observation decks circled above. Men in lab coats and suits watched from behind glass. The cage around the throat looked tighter now. More coils, more structure, more hardware bracing against its pulls. It spun slowly, shedding energy into gigantic sync arrays. Entities still clung to the outer structure. Extraction had dragged them along. Lux workers peeled them off with manipulators and cutters. Some fought, some hung limp. As I watched, a new cluster grew along one tether. Familiar shapes, loader arms, security plates, a stationed torso. Jinx, or what remained. They'd brought him aboard as part of the prize. He jerked once, then stilled as a manipulator sliced his rig apart. The clip cut. I lay there, breathing slow. When I blinked, the room returned. Smooth walls, soft light, my own chest rising under the harness. A panel in the far wall turned transparent. Behind the glass, a man watched me from another room. Different suit, different tablet. Lab smock over his shirt. Rain. He lifted a hand. Can you see anything when you connect? His voice crackled from a speaker near the ceiling. A vault. Cage. Men watching. You cutting pieces off something that used to wear my patch. He smiled faintly. Excellent. The link is functioning. The assembly interacts with nervous systems in interesting ways. Having a live conduit will help us design safer interfaces. A live conduit. That's you, Captain. Rain tapped the glass. Your nervous system has already adapted to standing in the throat's field. You survived exposure that would have shredded other men. That makes you valuable, irreplaceable even. Am I allowed to leave this room? In time. Once we're sure you aren't carrying anything that might compromise the ring. You already dragged the assembly into your foundations. How much more compromise can you get? He tilted his head. The ring can manage hardware threats. Human ones are trickier. That's why we watch you. He nodded to someone off-screen. The panel went opaque again. They cleared my record. They restored my citizenship. Then they bolted me to their new altar and called it observation. After a while, a technician entered. Young, nervous, eyes flicking between me and his handheld. His badge marked him as medical support. I need you to press your hand against the glass, he said, nodding toward a panel by my side. We're running a neural resonance test. He released the restraints from one arm and guided my hand to the glass. The panel felt cool. As soon as my skin met it, my neck implant flared. The image of the vault snapped into sharper focus. I saw the assembly cage, the coils, the men in the observation gallery. For one heartbeat, my reflection merged with a visor in that gallery. Not my current face, but my station armor, fangs crest on the shoulder, blood along the chain arrays. Behind that reflection, the throat glowed inside its cage. The rhythm in my skull matched a pulse in that chamber. Something between organic heartbeat and machine cycle, steady in a way neither could quite manage alone. You okay? The technician asked. I kept my hand where it was. I'm fine. He watched his readouts. There's a strong sync, almost perfect. Dr. Rain will be pleased. I aim to satisfy my employers. He didn't catch the tone. He stepped away, leaving my hand braced against the panel. The connections stayed open. Images flickered. The assembly. The vault. Men moving around it with tools. The ring curled around us, convinced it was safe because the monster sat behind glass instead of bulkheads. The tribunal is waiting already, somewhere up the chain. Not in a courtroom this time, but in a boardroom, on a private channel, inside a report annotated with my name. They'll watch my footage. They'll replay Bull dying under my saw. They'll rewind Jinx's last minutes. They'll run numbers over whether my choices optimized value. They'll clear me again, as long as I keep my hand on their glass and my mind wired into their God engine. I earned this. Every time I chose the contract over the man in front of me, I laid another stone on the path to this room. I leave my hand where it is. The weight in my neck stays in step with the beat from below, and I realize I never really left the station. I just moved from one siege altar to another.